Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. Across the country this past week, farmers continued to work to get their corn and soybeans in the ground. Planting progress has continued to move ahead, and farmers are keeping an eye on the sky. And that's the topic of our first Agronomy for Your Acres with our friends from Nutrient Ag Solutions. Joining me this week is Andrew Pritchard. He's the senior meteorologist on the Nutrient Ag Solutions Atmospheric Sciences team. And Andrew, I'm guessing some folks didn't even realize that Nutrient has an atmospheric science team. What do you guys do?
I get that question a surprising amount of times when I'm out traveling there. Why does Nutrient Ag Solutions have a team of atmospheric scientists? And the answer is, Nutrient Ag Solutions has decided to lean into the science of it all, to understand that for us to be able to best position our growers to have success during the growing season, we need to understand how the weather, not just the weather, but how the soil is going to be working to support your crops there. So we're leaning into the science. We want to understand how the weather is going to be impacting the growing season in your back 40 or across the region, if you're curious about that. So we understand the weather has, a big impact on the successes and the failures year to year, whether it's a good growing season or it's a finite disaster that we experience. And the more lead time we have on that, the better for the grower. The
more lead time, that is key. We've got to have this information in as far in advance as possible. As you look ahead to what could be coming this year, what are some of the under-the-radar issues you're watching, Andrew?
Absolutely. Well, as atmospheric scientists, it might surprise you to know that we look at the oceans a lot. We're looking at the ocean temperatures. And so myself, other meteorologists on the team here, we're spending a lot of time looking at the Pacific Ocean, some of the different warmer and cooler areas of ocean temperatures, ocean water there, and how that is going to be impacting the jet stream flow, because everything comes from the west here across North America. So how the jet stream is behaving over the Pacific Ocean is going to have a big impact on what we see in our weather here across North America. So spend a lot of time looking at the ocean temperatures. Some of the patterns there give us a little bit of concern here, maybe a higher chance for some heat and some drought stress across parts of the corn belt, parts of the growing belt here across the United States as we get into that critical summertime period.
So Andrew, as you take these longer term views of what's happening in the weather, you bring them to your growers and your crop consultants across the country. How does that help them manage these what ifs?
Well, a lot of the managing the what if is understanding don't bet the farm on a single forecast. We're monitoring a lot of different things. We get signals on some of these potential weather stressors, but we understand that every year these big disasters, they're often very, very localized. So we're understanding that we need to prepare for the worst, but knowing that the worst is a pretty rare outcome here. And so whether it's a good forecast, a stressful forecast, we want to understand that we don't bet the farm on that forecast. No, it's just some information to take along with you to help support the decisions you're making along the way.
Well, let's talk about that forecast for the summer, Andrew. You mentioned increased potential for heat and dryness. When would we start to see that impact in core crop producing regions?
Well, this is a critical time of the year as we monitor the jet stream. We go through that transition from the winter time when we have a very strong, a very energized jet stream that's producing very big storm systems that roll across the U.S. And as we get into May and June, the jet stream typically weakens and it starts to lift further and further north. And so we know that we're going to start to develop an area of high pressure across the lower 48 that's going to lead to some heat and some dryness where that ridge sets up. So that's why we start to look at the ocean temperatures to start to see, where that may shift that ridge east or west. We know that where the ridge is, they're going to be dealing with that heat. But we also know just on the edge of that ridge of high pressure, we'll have those beneficial thunderstorms that we need to bring rainfall during the season. So again, we're just kind of looking out there and knowing that we've got the potential for stresses here, but we don't know where that's going to set up yet. So that's the question that we'll be trying to answer here. The million-dollar question is looking for those market movers as we go through the summertime. Who's going to be dry? Who's going to see the rain? And that's something we're really working hard to figure out during these crucial weeks.
All right. Well, the growing season is underway. Your team has their work cut out for them. Andrew Pritchard, senior meteorologist with Nutrient Ag Solutions. Thanks for joining us this week.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And folks, learn more at nutrientagsolutions.com. Our market segment this week is brought to you by Farm Futures. Keep up to date on the volatile commodity markets at farmfutures.com. We're talking about what's moving in the world of commodity markets with Dan Huber of the Huber Report. Dan, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
We've seen this corn market really dancing around in here. Dan,
Sure.
What are you watching here from a planting perspective in the U.S.?
Well, really the new crop has held in just a little bit better than the old crop, but I mean, it is returned to, what has been some of the lows since the springtime here. Granted, there's not a lot that you can paint that's a great picture for the corn market as far as price recovery at this time, other than we've got all the weather risk in front of us. Sure, the crop's getting in the ground in good shape, seem to have adequate moisture at this point in time, but, we've got a lot of growing season ahead. So, I'd like to think we'll continue to hold at levels we're here looking at currently. But it's really going to take some kind of a weather spoof to make us recover from these values as well. So
you mentioned new crop is faring a little bit better than old crop in the markets right now. Is there any hope as old crop gets deeper into the summer season for farmers who are maybe undersold so far?
Well, yes. I mean, there's always going to be some kind of a possibility of a bounce, but demand continues to remain strong on old crop corn. So I mean, that is the buoying factor. So there are value buyers that have provided support underneath, but just like the new crop, we're going to need some kind of a new element, something that's maybe a little bit scary, that's going to take the shorts out of the complacency. A couple different times, large specs and managed money have both tried to move to the long side of the corn market, and it just has not panned out so far. But seasonally things generally look up into the summer months, so hopefully we get that kind of a rebound this year as well.
All right, and as we think about the new crop in particular, on Monday we do have the World Agricultural Supply and Demand estimates coming out from the USDA. Anything in there that could change the trajectory for the corn market?
Probably not a dramatic enough change to make a big difference. We're going to come out with a trend line yield, probably 181 bushel the acre. With the acreage that's projected this year, that will be a record production of corn, and the idea is we're going to move back above a 2 billion bushel carryout next year. All of those are definitely price limiting factors. Granted, none of them are in the bank, so to speak, but still, again, it's going to take some kind of a weather disruption to really see much recovery in the corn market.
As we think about Brazil, of course, their soybean harvest pretty well wrapped up, Dan. Do we
Correct.
have a sense as to what their safrinha, that second crop of corn, is going to look like?
It's got off to a little bit late start because the soybean harvest started a little bit late, but boy, they caught up well. Weather has been very, the growing conditions have been solid at this point. So, yeah, I mean, I think most people are thinking they're going to be 129 to 130 million metric tons for the crop. So a good solid crop. So here again, it's particularly in the environment we're dealing with around the world at this point in time, they're going to be very, very solid competition. Granted, the dollar has been on the defensive for the last several weeks, the last several months, I guess you'd say. So that helps out a little bit, but still does not put us into a great position when those other supplies are available. Maybe we'll always be a residual supplier, and if they can't find it anywhere else, we're going to be there with supply, but boy, they're not coming to our door first.
They're looking elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the wheat market real quick.
Sure.
Dan, we've seen this wheat market's trying to find a bottom. Are we getting close from a technical perspective?
Well, technically, yes. I think we're at good support levels again, have returned to, again, the levels that we saw last fall, that we saw in the spring. Seasonally, you tend not to find a bottom in wheat until the end of June, so maybe a little bit premature to start really thinking about much of a rally. But here again, too, I think you've got value buyers that are stepping in and providing a little bit of support here at this time.
In the meantime, any forecast of rain, you expect further weakness?
Oh, yeah. Crop conditions, the winter wheat, I think we bumped up to, a 51% good to excellent here in the last week. So, there's no threat out there that would really get anybody excited about rushing ahead and buying at this point in time.
All right. Lots to watch here as the summer moves ahead. When we come back, we'll talk about what's moving in the soybean markets.
Very good.
Our market segment today is brought to you by Farm Futures. Keep up to date with the volatile commodity markets at farmfutures.com. And we're back talking about the impact on the commodity markets with Dan Huber, author of the Huber Report. And Dan, we saw soybeans take a pop midweek as it looked like these conversations with China were going to kick off. And how much can we gain in the soybean market if we have a successful negotiation?
Well, I think that's more of a just wishful thinking or optimistic thinking that, boy, at least we've released some of the psychological pressure. But I mean, even with the bounce, we've really gone nowhere for 3-4 weeks now in the soybean market, just kind of trapped in a range, bouncing back and forth. The last day or so has kind of brought us toward the higher end of the range, but I haven't seen anything yet that would say we need to move it above and beyond there. Because of some of the late part of the harvest in Brazil, beans maybe didn't get to the port as quickly as some would have hoped, but they're there now. I mean, so I mean, really, Brazil will take over that export market in the soybeans, and we were just barely hanging on to that anyway with the with what was going to China. So it's you know, it's pretty easy to think that we're going to see the numbers drop off pretty consistently. We've already seen it in sales. Of course, we'll get another weekly sales report tomorrow, but it you know, that's already, you know, half to what it was. So it you know, again, pretty hard to come up with an encouraging word why soybeans would continue to move higher from where they have already.
Absolutely. And as we look ahead, of course, on Monday, we've got that supply and demand estimates report from the USDA. On the soybean front, given the risk to exports, could we see a market moving figure?
Again, highly unlikely. You know, and I think most of the emphasis on this report, not that there couldn't be a surprise in the old crop, but they've already, you know, basically pushed up some of the usage numbers on the exports on previous reports. I think will probably be pretty stable. Most people will be focusing more on what do they look at for potentially on the new crop. Are they going to start cutting that back? But you know, here we're looking at 3 million acres less of soybeans, but with trendline yield, if that happens to materialize, I mean, there's no guarantee of that, we're going to produce the same amount of soybeans basically as we did a year ago. And you know, then with any kind of reduction in usage, which of course they are anticipating, yeah, carry out could grow 30 to 50 million bushels, which is not major, but at the same token takes any upside potential really out of the market at that time.
Right, it's the wrong direction that producers would like to see.
Correct.
You mentioned Brazil. Their harvest is all wrapped up. Those beans are now headed to the port. What do we think the size of their harvest was? How many bushels do we estimate Brazil harvested this year?
The average trade guess right now is really 169.5 million metric tons, 169.7, somewhere in there. Record crop, certainly. And then when you look at South America as a whole, I mean, granted, Argentina had a few issues, but better crops than they've had for the last several years. So, I mean, we are looking at a sizable increase of total South American beans available this year. So again, just paints a kind of a bleak picture for any additional business coming out of the U.S.
It does indeed. But we've got one market that is not a bleak picture, Dan, and that's cattle. Continue to see record movements. What are you watching for a top in this cattle market?
Well, you know, the markets like this, you know, historic move. I mean, we've been trending higher for years and years, and of course, record highs posted here just in the last 6 months. And it's been very orderly so far. And generally, when you get into major tops, they come in kind of a panicky blow-off situation. We haven't seen that yet. Now, I would believe we're probably close to that scenario, but it hasn't happened yet. So, I mean, I think we pushed up in the 216 range here this week. So, I mean, 220 even. You know, even talking about 230 cattle, which would have seemed crazy 6 months ago, doesn't seem that far-fetched at this point in time. So, but I would suspect and suggest the end is near, so it's not time to necessarily go out and stock up the freezer at this point. So,
all right,
yeah.
Get those hedges on if
yes,
you've got those expensive cattle and feedlots. Dan Huber, author of the Huber Report, thank you so much for talking with us this week.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Well, Greg's been keeping an eye on what's in the sky over the country. And Greg, it was quiet last week in the Pacific Northwest. Does that continue this week?
No, another one of these kind of El Nino looking weather systems. You know, we've got it pretty much clear cut figured out in our head here since the beginning part of the year about the ongoing quick demise of La Nina, quick into the neutral state, and now it's an El Nino setup quickly developing across the waters of the Pacific. And this is a pretty impressive trough for the time of year moving inland, but it's to warm up too across the spring grain areas where there's some welcome shower and thunderstorm activity in some of the lingering dry and drought-ridden areas. We have seen some improvement across parts of Big Sky country. Higher peaks, yeah, cold enough with this trough moving on through to generate some higher elevation snow and of course some shower activity. Northern California, Pacific Northwest, and this is a slow-moving trough and probably the last significant organized moisture maker as you get farther east into the plains and across the western Corn Belt areas before the drought, as we are expecting with good confidence, to be moving in to the heartland with time. Look at the severe weather potential across the plains and points to the east and south. So an active weather pattern across the northwestern reaches of the country. The southern extension of that trough, the dip in the jet stream here, will once again bring another system ashore, a little more moisture, cooling up aloft, and yeah, some of the peaks across the central and southern Rockies come up with some late season snow. And on the plains, as we saw last week for a change, organized moisture to the western half of the winter wheat areas. We'll get into scattered showers and thunderstorms and severe stuff as the heat builds down through West Texas cotton, and some shower activity as well all the way down into parts of Southern California. A slow east and northeastward lift on that trough still keeps thunderstorm activity across the plains. Heavy and severe, cooler, drier air and gusty winds, desert southwest, and a return to sunshine and dry time across the valleys of California.
Now, this next week, do you expect to see northern Corn Belt farmers to have some fieldwork days?
Yes, exactly, and eastern areas as well, but still the last little piece of these kind of cut off lows, the main jet stream arced across the Canadian prairie, but again dipping back through the western states. These systems are what we call under the ridge, so they just meander their way, and still a drabble of moisture into parts of the eastern Corn Belt, but as a whole, making opportunities and gains out there with fieldwork. And of course, leading the pack has been the western Corn Belt areas, particularly in through Nebraska and Iowa, where scattered showers and thunderstorms are on this frontal boundary, and a buckling jet stream pattern will actually retrograde, move this frontal boundary back to the west. Gulf moisture works on in, and the last of organized moisture probably for the next couple of weeks getting going into the plains, while dry time, generally speaking, gets going into the eastern and southern Corn Belt locales. So we kind of reverse fortunes here, what we've seen over the past couple of weeks. Meanwhile, no shortage of moisture. Boy, they are flooded out into northern and eastern Texas and through bayou country. One system here, another one across the high plains with a rush of cooler air and a couple of dry base thunderstorms over the mountains of the southwest. We'll get a continuation of rainfall chances into the central and southern plains, Delta region, with some 90-95 degree heat into parts of the Rio Grande Valley. Some drought improvement there, Mike, over the past week to 10 days. A long way to go, though.
What do you see as you look all the way to the Atlantic, Greg?
Again, a little piece of that weather system up aloft across the Buckeye State. Still some spotty shower activity, but as a whole getting better with field work. Organized moisture in this trough moving through the northeast of New England. That's good news considering dryness and drought in that particular part of the country. Again, reverse fortunes with showers and thunderstorms. Western Corn Belt delays building there, but advance in the eastern sections, and a couple of showers still lingering across the northeast and New England. An active weather pattern down through Dixie from that system last week. Drought improvement and more to come with severe weather. Showers and thunderstorms here. Nice to see some rainfall into Florida. Note the showers and thunderstorms across the southern plains. They will continue into the lower Mississippi Valley, southeastern states. Heavy and severe as we head on through the late portion of the week. Some dry time expected on the southern plains.
Closed captioning this week is brought to you by Farm Progress. Their team of experts reports on innovative solutions and essential information for your farm business. Visit farmprogress.com to stay updated. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, I know a lot of you are getting your summer plans put together, and I hope that includes a trip to the Farm Progress Show, August 26th, 27th, and 28th. Now, this year, we're headed back to Illinois. It'll be in Decatur, Illinois, which means the week prior to Farm Progress Show, there's another event happening right outside in Rantoul, Illinois. Joining us now to talk about the Half Century of Progress Show is legendary farm broadcaster Max Armstrong. And Max, you're outstanding in your field again, it looks like.
Hey, Mike. Yeah, we're out here on a beautiful sunny day and very much anticipating all of the farm shows ahead, including those antique farm equipment shows, which get underway rather soon here.
They are. The temperatures are warming up. And of course, Max, you have been involved in the Half Century of Progress Show for years. Can you fill in our viewers as to what it is? What makes the Half Century so special?
I think one thing about it, Mike, is there's so much to see working in the fields. It's a demonstration show, just as the Farm Progress Show was from its very beginnings in 1953. And to celebrate the 50th anniversary of that show back in 2003, we started with a show right across the road using old equipment of the field to bring in the corn and soybean crops and to do some tillage out there, the old-fashioned way with the mold-board plows. And we've continued that every other year. And starting in 2005, we did it on the old Air Force Base at Rantoul, Illinois, as you said.
And of course, that's where it will be again this year on that same Air Force Base. Max, for viewers who've never been to the Half Century of Progress Show, what does it look like when you've got that many old tractors lined up on an old air base?
Well, it's an expansive facility for sure. I think we have close to 4,000 pieces of equipment that come in there. Now, I'm not just talking about tractors, but we have old combines and pickers and tillage equipment, discs, but equipment will come from all over the country. This is a feature year, Mike, for the International 1206. which came out in 1965, and it was made for 3 years by IH. The collectors hope to have 350 of those 1206s. We know some are coming down from Canada, some are coming from as far away as North Carolina, Mike.
That's fantastic, Max. You know, I saw a 1206 this past week pulling a 6-row planter out in a cornfield. So this is equipment that is still in use on farms around the country.
It eclipsed that 100 horsepower level for IH, and it was a very popular tractor. It still is to this day. Also featured will be Caterpillar. 100 years of Caterpillar. Cat just celebrated 100 years. Actually, on the 15th of April, I think, was the actual date of the start of Cat.
That's fantastic. Over 100 years of Caterpillar to celebrate those 1206s. And Max, when you've got this kind of heritage, this kind of show, and these kind of events to celebrate, what's the attendance look like for the Half Century of Progress show?
It is always so big, and I'm never really sure what it is. It is, like the Farm Progress show, so expansive. We have roughly 1,000 acres to utilize during this show. That municipal airport at Rantoul is shut down, so we get to use the runways, the taxiways, the aprons there, the concrete around there. Plus, we have the fields for the field demonstrations in those days, August 21st through the 24th. So it's a great opportunity to really see the equipment working out there.
It is, and of course, it's a great way to get a sense of the visual action happening on the farm. And Max, one of the cool things I like, one of the standout pictures from the Half Century each time it happens, is the largest American flag. Can you talk about the work that goes into getting that giant American flag up over the runway?
It's a bunch of Legionnaires from near Charlotte, North Carolina. Gastonia, North Carolina, I believe is the name of the town. And they bring that flag every year. 2 large cranes are put up so that flag can be seen flying in almost every picture taken at the show. And it's seen from all of the interstates nearby. You can see it from I-57 or I-74 a few miles before you get to the show. So it's been great to have that as a part of the show too, Mike.
That is neat, and it's one of those things that it highlights how essential to America agriculture has been throughout its history and continues to be, Max, as we look out to the future. And one of the things that I love about the Half Century show, the way you utilize those runways. Can you talk a little bit about the equipment parades?
Yeah, we have a daily parade each day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll open the show on Thursday, the 21st, with a tractor ride. I'll be leading a ride out across the countryside. I'm not sure I'll be using if I'll have the 51 International ready to go or not, but we're working on it, and I think it may be at the show, even if it doesn't lead the ride that first day. But we have that daily parade, and that's a special event. Golf carts and utility vehicles line that big north-south runway.
I'm glad you mentioned the golf carts, Max. What should folks think about if they need to be concerned about how they can get around on a big ground like Rantoul?
Yeah, we do run shuttles out there, but to have the flexibility of bringing a golf cart or a utility vehicle or renting one at the show, that really does make a difference on your ability to get around.
It does indeed. Max, now your truck there in the background, does that have air conditioning aftermarket, or are you just going to be a windows down driving fast?
It's going to be windows down, and one of them may be down all the time unless I get it fixed. Working on some of this 75-year-old equipment is a little bit out of my routine. I'm trying.
And I'm guessing when the Half Century of Progress show comes around, August 21st to the 24th, Max, you'll have the chance to get a lot of other great minds who have experimented with repairing older equipment.
You know, that's the neat thing about it. There are guys and girls who will work months in advance to make sure they have something ready, Mike, to bring to Rantoul. It becomes kind of a bucket list event for many people. And that's the neat thing about it, I think, for those of us who've been ready since the very beginning.
Max, real quick, before we let you go, tell us where can folks go to get registered for the Half Century of Progress show?
The website, halfcenturyofprogress.com, is a great place to see all of the information. You don't have to register in advance, but there's information there about getting golf carts, and all of the schedule will be there soon, too.
Halfcenturyofprogress.com. Max Armstrong, thank you so much for filling us in on what's to come in August.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Folks, leave it here. We'll have more after this.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Over the past several months, we've seen President Donald Trump try to change global trade flows. And one tool that the administration has used to do that is tariffs. We've heard a lot about tariffs. But there's another way that we could change global trade flows, and that's by looking at the ships that are carrying that trade. Joining me now is Mike Steenhoek. He's the Executive Director for the Soy Transportation Coalition. Mike, thanks for taking the time to talk with us today.
Hey, it's good to be with you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Now, we did recently see the Trump administration take a look at the types of ships that are carrying America's exports, and it sounds like a lot of them are Chinese-made, and so we're going to start putting fees on those ships. Can you fill us in on this situation?
Yeah, and it really is an effort to, number one, impose some punitive measures on the Chinese shipbuilding industry, and that's been an industry that's been prioritized by the Chinese for the past 25 years. And then also an effort to stimulate U.S. shipbuilding. And so what they've done is they've imposed a number of fees that will go into effect in October for ships that were manufactured in China and then also currently operated and owned by a Chinese entity. There's a certain fee associated with that. Now, if it's a Chinese-built vessel that is owned and operated by a non-Chinese entity, bulk vessels, and that's what accommodates a lot of soybeans and grain, they would be exempt from those fees up to a certain tonnage limit. So that's obvious. So we're glad that there's a good percentage of those ships that are exempt from these fees because they are owned and operated by a non-Chinese entity. But there are a number of ships that still are, and that's just one more potential cost that is being imposed on the agricultural supply chain. And that's, one of the things I just really urge, our government, if they're trying to promote U.S. exports, if they're trying to improve the U.S. supply chain, may they engage in subtraction math, not addition math. You want to be reducing the cents per bushel of delivered cost. You want to reduce the dollars per ton to get product from point A to point B. They should be engaging in subtraction math, not addition math. And unfortunately, there's a bit of addition math going on.
Now, all that said, Mike, the initial proposal for these port fees were much, much higher than the final figures rolled out by the Trump administration. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and we were certainly glad to see that there was some degree of listening to the feedback, which was really overwhelmingly negative from almost every aspect of the economy that really had concerns with these fees because they were very high. They were cumulative, so a ship that was arriving at multiple ports in the United States would pay that fee multiple occasions. So a lot of those things were adjusted. That's good news. But again, we don't operate in a very luxurious margin in agriculture. We operate in a very tight margin industry. So again, anytime you're imposing additional costs, it's reason for concern.
Absolutely. They come through the system in some way. Mike Steenhoek, Executive Director of the Soy Transportation Coalition, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you, Mike.
Agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier returns now with his extended farm weather forecast for the country.
Well, there will be some weather impact next week, as Greg talked about earlier in the program. Greg, who's going to see the precipitation next week?
Another El Nino looking type weather system. It ought to be into a drier mode at this point in the springtime season for the West and Pacific Northwest. Not the story. Look at the moisture here with time into the southwestern states. This blob, by the way, and its movement into the plains with time will be probably the last organized moisture maker over the next couple of 2 or 3 weeks on its move from northwest to southeast. Meanwhile, good coverage moisture in the southeastern states, more flooding potential eastern Texas here. And look at the severe weather ramping up southern plains, Ohio Valley, back into sections of the western Corn Belt. Best coverage moisture up to the north. I know across the southeastern states as well, but significant moisture. And again, unusual for the time of year, except if you're in an El Nino setup. And that's the story rapidly developing across the country.
How does that El Nino setup impact temperatures for the week of May 19th?
That warm dome, that hot dome is on the move. A little more progressive nature here, probably through the beginning part or first half of June. Then we lock it down from northwest to southeast with a definite drier and drought trend and worsening of that with time. But look at the warmth and probably some 90-degree air as far north as the Board of Trade. Warmth over the eastern half of the country, some cooling in the dip of the jet stream back across the western reaches of the country with good coverage moisture here. Higher peak snows, would you believe, into the northern Rockies and widespread showers and thunderstorms across the Corn Belt locales, probably heavy and severe, and the expectation of some field work delays as well.
How does that heat dome set up as we get into the month of June?
It looks like as we get into the waning days of June, May into June, we get a kind of a flattening off, a quick lobe of some cool air on the move across the northern parts of the country, some reduction and retrogression back across the western states as well, and no shortage in the transition of showers and thunderstorms here up near the Canadian border, parts of the Corn Belt, many actually good coverages here, and in across the northeast of New England. So drought relief here, additional drought relief in the northwestern Corn Belt, Pacific Northwest, again heavy and severe, high and dry across the southern plains and southwestern reaches of the country too.
Now for that first full week of June, Greg, what do you expect to see?
Welcome to meteorological summertime, and this is probably a good snapshot of locking down what the upper air configuration and the temperature pattern here by and large will play out here going forward into the remainder of summertime with lots of heat for the middle part of the country, western Corn Belt. From time to time we'll get a little reduction into parts of the eastern Corn Belt locales, the jet stream shifting farther to the north, and probably the last of any organized showers and thunderstorms over the eastern part of the country. Normal precip here, but fading. Look at the expanding dry time across areas of the northern and central plains, western reaches of the country. Going forward, dryness and drought will be the story northwest to southeast across the Corn Belt.
Our Farm Progress Update is sponsored by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of highly effective and efficient high-speed discs and land rollers. Visit brandt.ca for more. On Monday, we're going to get the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report from the USDA, and joining me now to talk about that report is Bruce Blythe. He serves as the senior editor over at Farm Futures. And Bruce, thanks for talking with us.
Thank you for having me.
Why is the May report an important one for the trade to keep an eye on?
The May WASDE supply demand report is typically USDA's, when USDA introduces its initial estimates for the upcoming crop year. In this case, that'll be 2025 to 2026. So this one carries a little more weight than your typical monthly WASDE report. And this one comes at a particularly pivotal time for the markets for obvious reasons with the tariff tensions and planning season underway. So I think there's going to be a fair amount of scrutiny on this report Monday, and it could have a decent market impact.
All right, let's talk through some of those numbers. Bruce, as we've got the new crop corn carryout expected to come in, it's going to be larger than last year. What's the trade figuring?
The trade numbers I've seen, the estimates are north of 2 billion bushels, which would be, 30 to 40% up from ending stocks projected for this year. That's a huge jump. Now, USDA may also lower its number for this crop year, its ending stocks number, just because export demand has been so strong. But next year we're looking at big acres, a 12-year high, and corn planting is based on USDA's forecast. Planting's been racing ahead, and we may be well over halfway done with corn by the end of this week. So.
All right, so we'll be watching Monday's report for any number much larger than 2 billion bushels could be seen as a selling opportunity here in these markets. As you think about what's happening, yield and acreage, we're not expected corn to change much for new crop on this report. They'll likely use their February numbers.
Probably something in the neighborhood of the 181 bushels they released in February. They're going with trend line at this point. So, you project that out over the 95 plus million acres. You're looking at a crop, a possibly record crop, 15.8 billion bushels, and 16 billion is not out of the realm of possibility this year with planning ahead of schedule and, if we avoid a major weather problem.
That's a lot of corn. It's a lot of corn, Bruce, but we've also got concerns about the soybean market. That's when the trade really seems to be watching closely. On Monday's report, what does the trade anticipate the carryout to be?
Soybeans are particularly in flux due to the situation with China and the Trump's aggressive tariffs, and that's got soybean carrot estimates all over the map. We're talking like low 200s to over 600 million estimated for 25-26. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty around that carryout number, to what extent USDA factors in trade tensions, any trade impact if it does at all. So I think that is one number in particular that's going to draw a lot of scrutiny and could have some impact on the new crop.
All right, we're not expecting any big changes to South American production in this season, right?
Probably not much. At this point, the crop is close to being in. It's widely expected to be a record in Brazil, 169 million metric tons based on USDA. Some private consultants see it north of 170. So there's a lot of soybeans coming out of South America.
All right, lots to watch in this market year ahead. Bruce Belay, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. There are questions you hear this time of year at tractor shows and festivals and parades. What is that for? Why did they make one of those? How do you use that? Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Lundell Plastics for 42 years. It's where innovation takes shape. Lundell Plastics, Vance Lundell and his team there making great polyplastic products for the folks in agriculture, grain and livestock producers. Check out their website, LundellPlastics.com. Well, Randy Yockey is the friendly Ford man. Roselle, Illinois. He's made his living selling things with engines, but nothing quite like this. Take a look at it. Oh, of course it's a John Deere. You know that immediately. But then you have to ask, what in the world is it? It was built to uproot and replant small trees. That high-clearance track superstructure was outfitted with a power-down tree spade. And it was made 66 years ago this past week at the Dubuque, Iowa plant by John Deere, that 430C crawler. Made in 1959. Yeah, it might be a little bit challenging for parades. Load it up on something else to take it down the parade route. Ask Randy Yockey about that thing sometime if you go in to deal with him on a Ford. Ask him about dealing on that beautiful John Deere one-of-a-kind tractor. Mark Stock deals all the time, but he's ready to tell you right now. He's waiting at the wings to share with us what's going to be selling at the week ahead at Big Iron Auctions.
Well, hello, Max. We've got grass getting green, and Big Iron will be selling some bulls and some cow-calf pairs on our special May 13th online auction. Black and Red Angus first calf and second calf heifer pairs will be offered on this outstanding sale. And Wednesday, May the 14th, is the Carol Olson Estate Sale, Atkinson, Nebraska. They'll be selling two 1979 Big Bud four-wheel drive tractors. Justin Fody from Paxton, Nebraska will sell a John Deere S 680 combine, Balzer 1450 tandem axle grain cart, a Soil Warrior 12-row 30 strip till machine, Pickett one-step bean cutter, a 1981 International 786 open station tractor. And we are in prime time hay season, so you'll find windrowers, hay rakes, round and square balers all selling on Big Iron. Plus, livestock is being moved to grass, so there's a great selection of gooseneck livestock trailers selling on May 14th. We want to congratulate all of the high school and college graduates all across the country. For those looking for summer internships or summer jobs, check out Big Iron and Sullivan Auctioneers.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Geringoff. Check out the new XFR 50 Draper with 3 times more flexibility than the closest competitor at Geringoff.com. Geringoff, proudly built in the American heartland. This week, we're getting to know Gentry Davis. She serves as a vice president for the Missouri State FFA. And Gentry, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I'm super excited about it.
Now, I'm curious, what made you want to be involved in FFA in the first place? Did you grow up in an agricultural family?
Yes, so I am from the state of Missouri, grew up in Saline County on a row crop operation. And so FFA, I guess you could say, was bred in my bloodlines. Coming from the Marshall FFA chapter, my great-grandfather was the first to receive his American degree. And so I wanted to kind of follow in those footsteps and lead on the family legacy.
That is quite a family legacy. And so you've had several years now as a member of FFA. What have been some of the highlights for you?
I'd say some of the highlights have definitely been the opportunities here with National FFA and Missouri FFA and just building those connections through those opportunities. And so some of my highlights, I would say, has been competing in different CDE and LDE contests, competing in the Speak Ag Showcase, which is a video over your state's agriculture, and winning the national level with that with my brother was super special. And so getting those opportunities and then applying that here to state office has been super remarkable.
That's fantastic. And of course, as you mentioned, state officer now. What have been some of the high points of your term as a state officer?
Yeah, I would say some of the high points as a state officer. Well, we just got done with our state convention here a few weeks ago in Columbia, Missouri, and so that was been a highlight. But ultimately, just getting to know the members across the state of Missouri and the diversity we have here with agriculture and the leadership that is built within our members has been truly remarkable. And so, just be an asset and get to witness that has been the highlight of my year.
That's great to hear. Gentry Davis, thank you so much for talking with us today, and we wish you the best of luck going forward.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by AGI, supporting your expertise with industry-leading grain handling, storage conditioning, and monitoring solutions. AGI, we're right there with you. Each year at the Farm Progress Show, those newest combines have to harvest corn, so it's crucial that that crop looks good. Chad Colby joins us now with an update from the Farm Progress Show grounds in Decatur.
Mike, can you believe the crops for the Farm Progress Show have been in the ground for 3 weeks? That's right, they were actually planted April 17th. And as you can see here, they look really good. The nice part about the Farm Progress Show, if you've never been, or if you have been in the past, is the field demonstrations. And one of the key parts of that is making sure you get the crops in on time, because obviously we've got to have them ready for harvest by the end of August. At the Farm Progress Show this year, you can expect to see a lot of the similar things you have in the past. But one thing we've noticed lately, there's just been a huge draw to the field demo areas, and for obvious reasons. A lot of manufacturers today, they're bringing out equipment and showcasing it at events like this for the very first time. It's been that way the last several years. Maybe you wanted to see the latest new combine for Case IH. Well, the first time you would see it is at the Farm Progress Show. And the Farm Progress Show is right around the corner. The cool thing is like I said, all the crops are in place. Actually, there's lawn mowing going on over here, I see already. And the great part is over the next couple months, you're going to hear a lot more from us on This Week in Agribusiness and what you can see at this year's show. I highly encourage you to start making your plans. Also, don't forget, Half Century of Progress in Rantoul, Illinois is the weekend before this. So I know a lot of you make plans to come to these awesome farm shows where you can see great demonstrations. And the neat part about it is you're going to see the latest in technology. I couldn't help myself this week. I talked to Matt Youngman, and he said things down here look great, and I totally agree with Matt. So if you've got any questions about the Farm Progress Show, go out to the website, take a look at it, and keep an eye on things, because there's so many great things at the Farm Progress Show. And like you, I cannot wait to see you there this year. We'll definitely have more here in the coming weeks. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. Glad those crops went in the ground pretty easily. Folks, they'll be ready for you end of August for the Farm Progress Show in Decatur. Well, as we've talked about a lot today already, tariffs and trade war headlines continue to move the agricultural markets. But according to the most recent Ag Economy Barometer from Purdue University and the CME Group, farmers are feeling a little more confident. Joining me now to talk through the results is Dr. Michael Langemeyer. He's an ag economist and the director of the Purdue Center for Commercial Agriculture. Dr. Langemeyer, thanks for joining us this week.
Glad to be here.
Let's talk about farmers are feeling more confident. Fill us in. In what ways are they feeling more confident?
Yeah, first of all, the Ag Economy Barometer, the Farm Sentiment Index itself was up 8 points, and both the index of current conditions and the index of future expectations were also up approximately 8 to 9 points. And so optimism increased both short term and long term.
Now, I know historically when we see these things increase, when we see farmers get more optimistic, typically it's because there's been a rally in the grain markets. Michael, is that something we've seen in this past month?
Well, certainly prices have been up and down. I mean, there's several things going on, but I think what's on a lot of people's minds is tariffs. And so I want to talk a little bit about 3 questions that we asked related to tariffs to help us understand this a little bit. First of all, producers realize that there's probably going to be some short-term pain in terms of net farm income. We asked a question, do you think tariffs will have a negative impact on net farm income in 2025? And 56% said yes. And so short-term pain related to tariffs. Why are they not more concerned then in terms of the index of current conditions? 80% think it's likely that we'll receive compensation for the tariffs, similar to what they received back in 2018 and 2019. the trade payments back in that period. And so they're thinking that these payments would offset some of the short-term pain they might be feeling from prices. But the most important question we asked was related to, do you think tariffs will strengthen the U.S. economy in the long run? And I was a little surprised at this answer. 70% said yes. And so as long as a lot of people think that this is going to, in the long run, this is going to be good for production agriculture, you're going to see the long-term expectations index is going to be relatively high.
Now, I know you also check with farmers about their expectations for farmland values, and Dr. Langemeier, what did you see in the last month on that sector?
Farmland values have been very stable. The index for the index looking 12 months ahead dropped a little bit, but it's been very stable. And there's still more producers that think that land value is going to go up in the next 12 months than think that land values are going to go down. When you look at the long run prospects for farmland values, that index has been extremely stable over the last year, and predominantly people think that land values are going to go up in the next 5 years. That's good
Lots
news.
to watch as this.
That's good news for the farm balance sheets.
It is indeed. It is indeed. We need to see that for those balance sheets. Dr. Michael Langemeier, thank you so much for joining us this week.
You're welcome.
Dr. Langemeier did say that the Purdue Ag Economy Barometer will be asking those questions to farmers about tariffs and the trade impact on their business as summer goes along. Thank you so much for joining us here this week. Be sure to catch us next time right here for This Week in Agribusiness. This Week in Agribusiness is recorded in the Strauss Studios. For more than 70 years and 3 generations, Strauss has been manufacturing high-performance, German-engineered workwear, work boots, and safety equipment. Prepare for the next growing season at Strauss.com.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.